the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran is dead, as is his entourage who was accompanying him on this helicopter journey, which includes the regime's foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdullahian. And I think it's important to take a step back for a minute and observe what's gone on and the regime's handling of the past 24 hours, which it really has demonstrated utter incompetence. And this will be at the forefront of the 85-year-old Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's mind, not least because he is fully aware if the regime's elite handle his death in the same way as they have handled the past 24 hours, that could lead to the entire unraveling of the Islamic Republic system, because succession of the Supreme Leader will be taking place against the backdrop of mass anti-regime sentiment in Iran. So for Khamenei, the Supreme Leader, the past 24 hours will have, in many ways, be viewed as a test run for his own death.
And when we talk about elections taking place, what does that mean in practice in a country like Iran?
Let's make it absolutely clear to your listeners. The Islamic Republic regime is a totalitarian, absolute dictatorship. Power is controlled by the 85-year-old Supreme Leader, who rules according to the Islamic Republic's constitution as God's representative on earth. Elections are nothing but a rubber stamp, and we have seen unprecedented election engineering. In fact, Raisi's victory as president in June 2021 was a de facto appointment. We have seen unprecedented engineering of elections, particularly in recent years, because Khamenei wants to consolidate his base and wants to install a new generation of absolutists precisely to guarantee a smooth and orderly succession process. As I said, he's 85 years old. At the front of his mind is succession. And the way in which these new elites have handled the past 24 hours will increase the Ayatollah's anxiety significantly.
It's really fascinating, that. Thank you for describing that so well. Kasra Aarabi is director of IRGC Research, United Against Nuclear Iran.
Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi has been killed in a helicopter crash alongside the country's foreign minister. Raisi was known as the Butcher of Tehran when he was a judge in the 80s. In recent years as president, he's been behind the repression of women-led protests. Ali Ansari is a professor at the University of St Andrews who specialises in the development of the Iranian state. Good morning, Ali.
Morning.
Does this impact the succession? Where does the political blow land from an incident like this?
I think it only affects the succession in terms of how the whole succession was being planned and organised. I'm not one of those that thought that Raisi actually was a realistic contender for the supreme leadership, and his presidency has not been a spectacular success. So if anything, taking on the presidency was a bit of a poison chalice for him. And I think a lot of people on left and right, I mean, the more moderates disliked him intensely, obviously because of what he did in the 1980s and afterwards. But even those on the sort of hardliner Islamists also found that he was unusually incompetent, even among the standards in Iran. So it wasn't really that I thought he was realistic for the supreme leadership when it came. But he was a pivotal player in terms of being president and one of the sort of key functionaries in the state to manage a transition. So the question is who they'll find to replace him as a sort of reliable technocrat to take that place and to be able to manage any transition, which I suspect will go to Khamenei's son, by the way. I mean, that's the direction of travel.
But this won't
have to wait and see.
But this won't be a liberalising force, will it? So it's unlikely he's going to be replaced with a more liberal figure.
No, not at all. And I mean, I there are several things here. I mean, there's not going to be a dramatic change, I think, in the way the country is the government or the direction of travel, because a lot of that is obviously organised by the Supreme Leader and the Revolutionary Guard. So I mean, it's not that the president really has that much power in that respect. I think what's important for the regime is that obviously this is not a good look, in the sense that here we have the president and the foreign minister in a very old helicopter traveling through the mist in a mountainous area, and people will say, what on earth were people thinking? I mean, so there will be questions, and I suspect we'll have to see what comes out of this. And of course, Iran being Iran, the conspiracy theories will be absolutely mushrooming at the moment.
I can well imagine. But the prestige point is a very, very good one. I think it's well worth making. Ali, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
The president of Iran has been confirmed dead following a helicopter crash in the mountains yesterday. Ebrahim Raisi was considered the man in line to become the state's supreme leader and used to be part of a panel responsible for the deaths of an estimated 5,000 political prisoners in the 1980s. Nagar Mortazavi, an American-Iranian journalist, told Times Radio that the vice president will now temporarily take over and explained how his death will impact Iran.
There's a parliamentary elections upcoming and then the next presidential election. So this is going to have impact on the domestic politics of the country. And then looking at that question of succession for the long term, having a slate of candidates as potential succession to the supreme leader is also not something that can be done in short term. So it's going to create disruption.
Greg Karlstrom is the Middle East correspondent for The Economist. We can speak to him now. Good morning to you, Greg.
Good morning.
Raisi's dead now, and that means there will be another election for presidency. I guess there's a question. The last one, there was a very low turnout because of protests against the regime. Is that likely to continue, or might there be even more active protests with the next round of presidential elections?
I think it's likely to be a very low turnout election. The Constitution says that a new election has to be organized within 50 days of the president's death. Now, last time in 2021, when Raisi was elected, the Guardian Council, which vets candidates, disqualified all but 7 candidates. It disqualified 600 people who wanted to run for president, and it ensured that Raisi had a clear field. He had no serious challengers in that election. Now they, on very short notice, have to find another consensus candidate, and I think they're going to struggle to figure out who that person is. And once they find someone and clear the field for that person, I would imagine turnout will be quite low.
And what they're looking for a religious hardliner, obviously. Does this job need to have a look ahead to be a possible succession plan for the supreme leader, or does that just happen to be the case for Raisi?
I think it happened to be the case for him. I think what they're looking for now will be someone who is a conservative, who is a staunch conservative, whose credentials cannot be questioned. But I don't think anyone who has their eye on the top job, who has their eye on becoming the supreme leader, would actually want to become president at this point, in part because of the experience that Raisi had, where he presided over a very difficult economy for the past few years that contributed to his widespread unpopularity in Iran. It's almost a poison chalice taking on the presidency. And I don't think it's something that any of the other likely contenders for supreme leader would want to do.
Do the ripples of this flow out into the region generally? Obviously, Raisi was involved in the attack on Israel. Is there any global, international impact of his death, do you feel?
I don't think Iran's foreign policy is going to change in the short term. Raisi was certainly, as you said, involved in the attack on Israel and Iran's very belligerent policy of the past few months, but he wasn't the prime mover in that. That was something that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was really pushing for, and they are the power behind the scenes when it comes to foreign policy and military policy. So I think the immediate question in terms of the regional implications is just what exactly happened in this helicopter crash. The Iranians so far saying it was bad weather. And if that's the story, I think there are no broader regional implications. But keeping an eye on whether anyone in Iran starts talking about whether either domestic foes or external foes might have had a hand in this. Again, so far there's no suggestion that anyone did, but it would be significant if the Iranians started talking about that.
I mean, it's not a safe country to be in the air very often, is it, Iran? I read that could be a very old helicopter, a 70s helicopter, because those type of helicopters were provided by the US, and obviously the US have been imposing sanctions since 79. So it could well be that it was just a very old helicopter.
It's entirely plausible. It's a country with a terrible aviation safety record. For commercial aviation, one of the worst in the world because of sanctions, because of the inability to get spare parts for what are now planes that are almost half a century old. This particular helicopter that he was flying in, it was involved in at least 6 other deadly crashes around the world. just in the past year, flying in a helicopter can be dangerous, and especially in bad weather. So I think more likely than not, the story here that it was bad weather is the story of what actually happened. It's true.
Yeah, we'll see how the story progresses. Greg, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Greg Kostrom, the Middle East correspondent for The Economist. This is either just a death, an accident like this, even if the guy was the butcher of Tehran, or it's something more significant. It sounds very much like it's an accidental death at this stage.
Now, you mentioned Tehran, and we must ask you about your reaction to the death of President Raisi, who, of course, was behind many things, including the drone and missile attack on Israel.
Yeah, you don't find me today somebody who is a very sad person. Of course, the only question is who might replace him. You never know these things in advance. I mean, even when we know the name of the person who will be selected first by the mullahs and then so-called elected by the people, we will not know who he is until we see what he. I'm saying, usually I'm saying he or she, but there is no big chance for having a she.
No.
So, so we will not know what is the real face would be. I mean, you can find out that eventually he is a Gorbachev. And you can find out that he is a kind of Andropov. You know, you don't know. You don't know in advance.
Okay. Yossi Bilin, thank you very much for talking to us. He's a veteran peace negotiator and one of the authors of the Oslo Accords.